Good evening, welcome to Last Orders with me, Duncan Wood, and our panel of politicians. Coming up on tonight's programme, can there ever be a positive future for former coalfield communities? And what of coastal tourism? There might be positivity in buckets full, but have the sands of time taken their toll on the traditional homegrown holiday? And
Caresses is developing the world's first culturally aware robots aimed at assisting and caring for the elderly.
robots in Parliament? Surely not. Well, joining me this evening are Angela Smith, the Labour MP for Penistone and Stocksbridge, and Martin Vickers, the Conservative MP for Cleethorpes. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. But let's kick off with that old perennial, Brexit. Well, the week started with a memorable England victory for adopted Yorkshireman Gareth Southgate over in Spain. Last night, bit of a score draw in Belgium. Now it looks like we're heading for Brextra time and, who knows, penalties to reach a deal to leave the EU. Who knows where the Germans will be by then. Of course, Theresa May went to Brussels last night to talk about Chequers, the Irish backstop and Canada Plus. She wasn't invited to stay for dinner with the other 27 EU leaders. And as we know, the main thing to come out is we're looking at extra time, more things to happen over a following 12-month period possibly to get things in place. Angela, do we need that extra time? Should we have that extra time? What is going on?
Well, I mean, nothing's changed, has it, as a result of this summit? The call for extra time doesn't mean a great deal in terms, in the sense that we have no sense of a withdrawal agreement and no sense of what any future treaty may look like. So we're still at square one on one level. And I actually think that the real problem here isn't the relationship with the European Union and the UK. The problem is relationships within the Conservative Party in terms of Theresa May's, top priority, which is to try to hold her party together. So I think the problem is here in Britain. It's at Westminster.
And the problems with your leader?
Well, we've already had the extra time, and I mean, Angela sort of points at the Conservative Party. What the government are actually trying to do, of course, is deliver on the result of the referendum, and 17.4 million people, as we know, voted to leave the EU, and it would be very damaging to the whole of our democratic process if we did not honour that. The Prime Minister is struggling, there's no getting away from that. I don't see that she could possibly get another dose of extra time through the parliamentary party, and no doubt there will be negotiations, shall we put it no stronger than that, going on within the party over the weekend, and before she no doubt makes a statement on Monday.
Well, let's cut to the chase. Should she still be doing any negotiating at all? Should she still be leading your party? Should she still be Prime Minister?
Well, as I've been telling my constituents who write to me ever more strongly with their views, there's no guarantee that they will get a successor to Mrs May if that was the process that fitted their particular mould. What they want is a really ardent Brexiteer, which may or may not emerge. The fact is, it won't change the parliamentary arithmetic, but I don't think I'm speaking out of turn to say she's skating on thin ice.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I have to say that I've now got constituents coming to me expressing to me real concerns over the future. A lady came to see me 2 weeks ago, runs a small business, a very important business, piloting and testing new clinical treatments for cancer. She doesn't know what's going to happen on VAT after exit. She's got no idea about whether or not she's going to have to pay the VAT herself on goods coming in from the European Union and then get reimbursements, which would cause severe problems for her cash flow. Potentially could put her out of business. We need some clarity, and what we've heard from Martin is about the importance of getting the Conservative Party politics right. What about the country? What about the role of Westminster and the Parliament as a whole in dealing with this?
Parliament will have its say on this, as we know.
Well, but it seems to me that the Conservative Party and its unity in the position of Theresa May, Martin, is more important than the role of Parliament. And actually, the role of the country in saying whether or not it agrees with the negotiations or the deal that is finally put on the table. I think the country has a role to play in this as well.
When we say, how long can this go on? It looks as though it could go on and on and on. There's now going to be no meeting, no summit next month in November to what we hoped would be to finally rubber stamp the deal. That's gone.
Well, as I understand the position, unless the government were to come forward changing the date to leave, which I understand would also need the consent of the other 27 nations, then if the deal is voted down, we still leave on the 29th of March. So that I acknowledge what Angela says, it is causing uncertainty for businesses, but equally there are businesses eager to take the opportunities that Brexit offers, and I was talking to a host of them around the port of Immingham only last week.
But what are the opportunities, Martin? I've read this morning that the US, if we were to get a trade deal with the US, then there would probably be a clause in it that would prevent us doing a trade deal with China. What kind of outcome is that for Brexit, when we would have a country like the United States saying to us, you can't do deals with China? That is not sovereignty, is it?
Well,
that's not sovereignty.
I was at a meeting...
And that would economically cripple us.
Yeah, I was at a meeting with Liam Fox and the trade commissioners, 8 of the 9, only yesterday morning at the Department of Trade, and there is very strong optimism amongst the professionals, not put the politicians to one side who may have their own agenda, but the professionals who are out there doing the negotiations in Europe, Asia, and Asia is particularly important because that's the growing economy, just like South America, and those are where we need to be focusing.
So do we do a trade deal with China or the US? It's Donald Trump that's got the agenda. Do we do a trade deal with China or the US?
Well, whoever we do something with, surely it's just got to benefit all the people in Yorkshire, Lincolnshire, Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire, all the people who are watching tonight. How confident are you that that's actually going to happen?
I have no confidence that that's going to happen. To be honest, for me, the priority for Theresa May should be maintaining the strength of our economy, making sure that we don't lose jobs because of Brexit, that we don't lose economic growth. And I see no sign of that in her approach, because she seems to be, it's not her fault particularly, more focused on preserving Tory party unity and dealing with her Brexiteers than in coming up with a deal that's good for the country.
Equally so, the EU seem determined to be as difficult as possible, and it's they who will suffer. Reaching an agreement is mutually beneficial.
But the point the EU would make is that they've put options on the table. They're not going to unravel their structures, the single market, the customs union, for the sake of a country that wants to leave. No, but that's not reasonable. That's not reasonable.
Could any of your constituents actually have foreseen this when they put their vote in the ballot box for the referendum, that we would end up in this situation? 70% of your constituents wanted to leave the EU, and you're definitely wanting to do the same. But could they ever foreseen what would happen?
Well, they didn't foresee that it was going to take as long as this. But what they did foresee, or what they were repeatedly told during the referendum campaign, was that they would be poorer as a result, because David Cameron, and in particular George Osborne, was threatening them with Project Fear. And they said, right, we're prepared to take a financial hit because we want to regain control. And if there was another vote next week in Cleethorpes, there would be 75% voting to leave.
Well, they were told that they would get, what was it, 375 million for the NHS.
Which has been delivered.
No, it hasn't been delivered by a Brexit. It's going to be delivered by an increase in taxation.
Well, we don't know that yet.
We do know that, and I think that my voters certainly didn't expect this when they voted 2 years ago. That's why I think we do need the people's vote. We do need to go back to the country on this, because it's entirely, nobody envisaged this situation. Nobody thought that we would be crashing out potentially without a decent deal on the table.
Another vote, Martin?
Another vote would be an absolute disaster. It would not be about the deal. It would be a rerun of shall we stay or shall we leave. And the people in Cleethorpes, and I would suggest in Penistone, would see it as the politicians trying to reverse the decision taken by the people.
No. If a trade union is told to go away by its members to do a deal with the management, the trade union always goes back to the members to agree the deal.
We're not comparing like with like.
Principle. No, it's the same principle.
Do you know what? I could see this even going to penalties. Never mind the extra time. It is going to go on and on. But surely
we're getting better at penalties.
Yes, we are getting. I was just getting. You just got there before me. We are getting better at penalties. Thank goodness for Gareth Southgate. But I mean, should Gareth Southgate be running the country? I mean, you say that Theresa May is skating on thin ice. How long do you give her to sort this out? Till May the 29th, March the 29th next year?
Well, if she persists with extending the transition period even further into 2021, when, for example, the Scottish elections take place, and into 2022, when there has to be a general election, then I think it's a political time bomb, which any Prime Minister would be wise to avoid at all costs.
Martin? Shouldn't she just go now?
Well, that's up to the Prime Minister. I'm not going to push her.
OK, thank you very much indeed for those comments about Brexit. We're going to move on because they may sound like odd bedfellows, but over the years they've provided thousands of jobs in the region. So what's the future for former coal mining areas? And also the seaside. The mining industry has, of course, gone, and there have been endless attempts to try and regenerate those areas, some successful, some not. But resorts in our region stretching from Skegness in Lincolnshire to Whitby up in North Yorkshire, and the number of people visiting them is absolutely vital to the coastal economy, which is under threat yet again. Tourism in Lincolnshire as a whole employs more than 19,000 people, and in 2016 was worth £1.37 billion. Back inland, last week a delegation from the House of Lords visited deprived former coalfield areas in South Yorkshire. Now, the Lords Rural Economy Committee went to a new social housing project in Goldthorpe and a community shop in Barnsley, which helps people receiving benefits. They'll report to the government early next year on what extra help is required by former coalfield communities.
You can see a large number of new businesses that have opened up in the area. We're seeing all the way along on the roads that we've been driving new buildings going up. But there are issues to do with inadequate housing, for example. So we've been to see ways of developing new affordable housing that can be brought in relatively cheaply. Of course, we know that there are problems and money is important to overcome those problems. But also there are ways of making great progress through projects like this, bringing local people together, helping empower them so that they can go out and make things happen on the ground.
Local people helping themselves. How do we ensure that there is a future for our communities and our coastline? Andrew, you said you'd been to that shop. Yes. Is that the future? Everybody getting together in the community to help themselves?
There is an element of that. I'm really pleased that the Lords visited Goldthorpe and the shop and other, ex-mining communities. I think the issue here is that when an economy is built in villages, as it was in Barnsley, it's actually really, really quite difficult to move on from that, because we don't build economies in villages with anything really equivalent to the power of what coal mining was. So there's an issue there, but I think there's a political question here. I don't think that my party has paid sufficient attention to rural areas, frankly, in the last few decades. And equally, I think the Conservative Party, although it likes to think of itself as the party of the country, hasn't actually ever delivered as successfully as Labour governments have. So I think both parties have questions to answer about their attitudes to rural areas in terms of transport provision, housing, encouraging economic growth. And it's interesting, when Sheffield developed its plan for the city region, it was really interesting. The rural areas, which is 70% of South Yorkshire, was seen as an adjunct to the city. And to the towns. So that's really not good enough. We need to change our mindset in terms of what rural areas deliver for Britain.
We can all go back and look at industries that have gone, the mining industry, the fishing industry. Has enough been done? What lessons have we not learned over the years to regenerate these areas successfully?
Well, it's perfectly true that coastal communities in general, and the Grimsby Cleethorpes area is a prime example, have never wholly recovered from the decline of the deep sea fishing industry. And successive governments have done the bit with development area status and all the various grants and so on. But it's never really got to the heart of the issue. In Cleethorpes, we've done pretty well over the last couple of years in funds we've got from the Coastal Communities Fund, and we've also now negotiated the Greater Grimsby Town Deal, which covers the whole of North East Lincolnshire, which is private sector led with a bit of government support. And if only half of the plans that we've got come to fruition, then it will be a real boost for the area.
That's again the thing, though. If half the plans come to fruition, the plans.
Yeah.
And you know, putting millions of pounds in to pedestrianise areas around the High Street, around C Street, and things like that are all well and good, but they've got to be delivered and then acted upon, and that's where things probably are falling down.
And in the end, it's about employment. It's about enabling people to get to work. It's about giving people decent homes to live in. I mean, I represent a rural constituency, and I come from Martin's constituency, so I know Cleethorpes really well. I used to work in Cleethorpes, and I think in both cases there are similarities. We need good employment opportunities, economic growth, the real bread and butter stuff, houses to live in that are affordable, and transport. And transport's been decimated under this government, I have to say.
And it seems like when you look at the figures, as we said earlier, about how much tourism is worth to the Lincolnshire economy, how many jobs are involved there, that's great, but that's cyclical. That's people who are, you know, if the sun doesn't shine, you're not going to get the numbers that you've just said just now. So it's concrete stuff that we need, concrete jobs. And is there a way to do that?
Well, there is a way. I mean, I mentioned the town deal again, because it is actually, I think, one of the plans which will come to fruition. You know, I served as a councillor in Grimsby for 26 years, and I've seen countless plans. I've got a filing cupboard full of plans which have never been delivered. This time we have got a plan which, because it's predominantly funded by the private sector, shows real prospects. But I acknowledge that all governments have failed, and you talk about transport connections. Only yesterday afternoon I was speaking in a Commons debate about the need for a direct train service from Cleethorpes to King's Cross, which is needed not just for the tourist trade, but industries crying out for it. What we need in the Grimsby Cleethorpes area is more good, high-skilled, quality jobs. You know, we've got thousands of jobs in fish processing, which is great, but we do need some at the top end.
And data, I mean, I agree in terms of good, high-quality, highly skilled jobs, but public transport, I mean, we need railway investment, absolutely, in my area and Martin's, but it's bus transport that's been decimated, really decimated. I've got constituents in the villages in my constituency who complain to me all the time about the withdrawal of services. In one village, there's very little opportunity to take a direct service to the local hospitals, to the local shopping centres, into Barnsley. You know, it's absolutely dire, the situation in relation to bus transport.
Not to throw us back to the original debate we had, but do you think constituents may think that Brexit, when it comes in whatever shape and form it does, because it's going to come, is going to be the great panacea that does solve a lot of these problems? Do they think that's going to be the case?
Well, I don't think they think they're going to solve the problem of rural bus services. But you know, I repeated what I said earlier. There's no doubt that the vast majority of my constituents believed in Brexit, and they still want to deliver Brexit. And it wasn't just because of the financial hit that they may take or the benefits they may gain. It was because control, sovereignty, whatever you want to call it, was seen to be slipping away. They felt that they had got so little control over decisions that were being made, and it's vitally important that we reverse that. Otherwise, people will lose faith in what little faith they still have in the political process.
But we won't be strengthening sovereignty if we cede control to the likes of Donald Trump, frankly.
OK, we'll leave that subject there. We'll go on to our final topic of the evening, if that's OK. Because finally, Pepper the robot was taking questions from MPs this week. She comes from Middlesex University and was delighted to be asked to give evidence to the Education Select Committee, who are inquiring into the future impact of artificial intelligence and robot technology. Now, she held her own on being asked some searching questions.
What is the role for humans in the fourth industrial revolution?
Robots will have an important role to play, but we will always need the soft skills that are unique to humans to sense, make, and drive value from technology.
We should give a round of applause to Pepper and the students.
I don't know about you at home, but me and robots, I always think they should be dressed. I mean, that robot's naked there. Why can't they be wearing clothes? I mean, that has to be the future. But that aside, I mean, very important, the reason that Pepper was there for the Education Select Committee. But what do you both feel about the future of that kind of technology and what impact it could have in our region?
Well, we've got to harness the technology in order for the benefit of humankind, haven't we? I mean, it is a challenge. I can't say I've turned my thoughts to it too much since I saw Pepper a day or two ago perform in front of the committee. But yeah, the thought of it being naked had not occurred to me. But no doubt
that's just me in this time of the evening.
No doubt they will develop like Mr. Data in Star Trek, and they will, you know, be very much like humans.
It is a bit Star Wars-ish, you
Yeah,
know.
it
It feels a bit like Star Wars, but you know, I think there is obviously a role for this technology, and it's not going to work out in quite the way as perhaps was suggested by the rather interesting Select Committee appearance. I mean, I just think we need to remember that humans in the end will always hopefully be in control, and if they're not, that's something to worry about. I mean, I have one of these Alexas now, and she asked me the other day when I put her on, she said, do you want to sign up to Amazon Prime? And I said, well, I might. And she said, yes, OK, I sign you up. So, you know,
that was it, you were signed up.
Yes.
Other things are available as well as Amazon Prime. We are on commercial television, I have to say that.
Oh, sorry.
But, no, it's all right. But the thing is, the soft skills, the actual programming and things will always be required. But it's how far we can take this technology.
Yeah.
Will it be useful in schools? I mean, nowadays everybody has the computer and the phone that everybody looks at and doesn't look at anybody else and doesn't talk to anybody else. I don't think that's actually a very good thing.
No.
So we lose a lot of social skills. Is that something that's at risk by putting this kind of technology through our school system and actually working that way?
Yes, I mean, that's an interesting point. I mean, I spent quite a lot of time in both Eastern Europe and in Bosnia-Herzegovina recently, and it was actually really noticeable that local people, as they're bustling around Tbilisi or Sarajevo, weren't on their phones. They weren't walking along looking on their phones. Like, they were talking to each other, interacting. And I actually find now that it's quite difficult to walk down a street because there's people constantly on their phones, stopping suddenly in the middle of the pavement. It's not good for social interaction.
It's going to be a real challenge, particularly for our younger generation who get hooked on the phones and tablets and things at a very early age, and we do need to wean them off it. There's no doubt about it.
I think we have several challenges coming up in the future, but Martin and Angela, thank you so much for joining us on Last Orders this evening. We appreciate all that you've done this evening. That's it. We're back again next month. Have a very good evening. Have a very good evening. Have a very good evening. Robot?